Good evening. Welcome to the 2024 Forms Webinar. The National Audubon Society's Christmas Bird Count is a citizen science project that has been tallying birds for over a century. It is the largest citizen science project in the world. The 2024-2025 Christmas bird count will be the 125th. Now, the Salem CBC organization is as follows. Tim Johnson is the primary compiler, while Gretchen Johnson and myself are co-compilers. We've divided up the duties. Gretchen organized the field aspects, such as the sector leaders and getting team members for the teams. Tim is the feeder counts and forms, and I handle the CBC articles and data entry. Let's take a look at this Salem Area CBC circle. Within each circle is separated into sectors. We have 10 sectors. Number 9 is divided in half, parts A and B. And then each sector has a sector leader, as we said earlier, and is 15 miles across each circle. Here's the sector map for sector number 1. It's a fairly large sector, as you can see here. We're going to talk about record keeping today. And there's several forms that need to be kept while we're doing the Christmas bird count. We want to keep and maintain an accurate listing of all the species that we see and hear. We also need to document any rare or unusual species, including obtaining a photo or an audio recording if possible. Also, it's important to keep the effort statistics, which we'll go over in a little bit. Here's the forms we'll talk about: the field tally form, feeder form, and also the effort worksheets. The first one we'll talk about is the field tally sheet. This is the one used out in the field and lists all the possible birds that could be observed during the Christmas bird count. If the bird isn't on here, then you would have to fill out the rare bird form, which we'll go over a little bit later. But each team uses this form to mark down any of the birds that they observe. If one isn't on the list, they just write it in here and would, like I say, fill out the rare bird form. Here's the feeder tally sheet. These are the people at their homes who are looking at their bird feeders. They can watch their bird feeders for as little as 15 minutes. You put down your time based on 15-minute segments or a quarter hour. Here's a nice list of the birds that you could see at your feeders. The same thing applies if you see a bird that isn't on the list, write it in and do a rare bird list. Then you may, after the CBC, you mail in the list to Tim. Last year we had 38 people doing feeder counts. The first effort worksheet is the team effort worksheet. Each team fills one of these out. It's very important to keep the effort. For example, we put in the starting time, ending time, and how many hours were by foot, and how many hours are in a car. We'll go over this in just a minute. But it's real important to keep this effort portion because, for example, let's say there's two teams, A and B, and A saw 20 mourning doves and the B team saw 20 mourning doves. Well, it means a lot to the researcher about how much time each team spent looking for birds. So for example, let's say Team A spent 10 hours and Team B spent 5 hours. Well, that would mean Team A saw 2 doves per hour, while Team B saw 4 doves per hour. So the researchers would use that information, and it does make a difference in their data collection and the validity of the data. Let's see how to fill one of these forms out. So this is an example for my sector. We divided up, for example, our first stop was at a park and we started at 8 a.m. End time was 9 a.m. We spent 1 hour on foot and traveled 3/4 of a mile. We did not drive in our car or do any alloying. Now the next little segment here is from 9 to 9:05. We didn't do any birding on foot, but we drove 5 minutes and we went 2.5 miles while keeping track of birds. So you fill out each line, and this helps with each driving miles that you go, and each hour in miles that you spend on foot, you can track them for each place you are. And at the end, you total it up, and each team would submit this to their sector leader. In turn, the sector leader has this sector effort worksheet where they take each team's worksheet and enters it on here. So if you had 10 teams, for each team, you'd fill this out. The team leader, the total hours on foot. Like, let's just go back one slide and they take these numbers here: total hours on foot, miles on foot, hours in the car, miles in the car, and any alloying hours and miles. And for each team entered on these lines, depending on some teams, some sectors have 2 teams, some have as many as 10, do all the entry and add it up here, and this would be turned into the compilers for entry into the National Audubon database. Here's a sample of a sector effort worksheet. Here, the team of Amy and Susie, they were 5 hours and 5 minutes on foot total, 5.5 miles on foot. They were an hour and 15 minutes in a car and drove 22.5 miles. They also spent 1 hour alloying and went 10 miles. The second team, Mike's, was 5 hours, 55 minutes, and you just go along here. Then the sector leader adds them all up, and then this is your sector effort. Now, we talked earlier about the rare bird documentation sheet. Here is the sheet. You fill out this sheet, including where you saw the bird, a good description of the bird. You want to document it as thoroughly as possible, including a description of the bird, the habitat where it was found, any behavior, any similar species that you eliminated. It's also helpful to have a sketch of the bird or get a photo or sound recording of the bird. This is then turned into the sector leader, who turns it into the compilers, and then it is overseen by the main compiler, Joel Geyer, and it's determined whether it's accepted or not. The participants registration form, this is for the sector leaders. We put in the name, the city, contact information, and emergency contact person and their phone number in case anything happens. We keep track of all of these because when we submit all the data to the National Audubon Society in their database, this is one of the components that we enter is all the participants. Last year in the field, we had 66 participants, so all that information needs to be added into the database. We also add into weather, a nice summary of the CBC for Salem, some of the main things we saw, and some of the records, lows and highs, for example. So there's quite a bit of information. Of course, we enter each species observed during the CBC. Oh, and the CBC, as it says here, is on December 21st this year. Let's talk a little bit about the countdown dinner. The countdown dinner is when everybody gets together at someone's house, and we go over all the statistics, and each of the sector leaders total up all the data for their sector, bring it to the dinner, and then we all sit down, we have a potluck, and we go through the list, and we say, okay, mourning dove. If you saw a mourning dove, everybody raises their hand. If they didn't see a bird, nobody raised their hand, and we go through the whole list and determine, that's how we determine how many species were seen, which was like 123 last year. It was a record year. Mark your calendar for Sunday, December 22nd, 2 p.m. most likely. It'll be announced later. Anyone is welcome to attend. We'll announce it, and also your sector leaders will let you know the exact details on the countdown dinner. It's a really exciting time, and everyone's invited to attend. Now, if you need more information, contact your sector leader or the compiler, Tim Johnson. There's also a lot of good information on this National Audubon CBC website. You can see this link here. So you can also be familiar with, it goes over a lot of information on the Christmas bird count. Also, one of our birding experts in Oregon has a great article, The Art of the Christmas Bird Count, which is a good resource. And lastly, I'd like to thank you for viewing this webinar. We wish you good birding. If you'd like to participate in this year's CBC, contact Gretchen or one of the sector leaders. The feeder watchers, you can sign up with Tim. Gretchen can be reached. I'm sorry, I left her email out, but you can reach Tim for any questions, 503-507-8552. So thank you, and we're looking forward to a great, successful CBC.